All right. Hey, everybody. It's First Warn Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're going to do this again tonight. We did this last night, and we brought in a couple different people here. So, again, I'm the meteorologist here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Around the horn, we've got Tim Buckley, Chief Meteorologist at WFMY. Efren Afante, up or down, I should say, in Columbia, South Carolina. And our new guest tonight, Topper Schutt, up in the DC area. Topper, good to see you. Happy with us. And we've
Thank you, Brad.
also got our own Savannah Levins, who is live in the Wilmington area. Now, we're going to try to answer as many questions tonight that we're getting in from viewers. So if you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, or wherever, multiple Facebook pages, go ahead and send those comments in there. We'll try to flag as many as we can. But before we get to those questions and we give time for people to kind of log on and watch, I want to go to Savannah first because you're out in the field. And so tonight we're going to bring you in because you're in the Wilmington area. And right now, the center of the storm, and I'm actually going to bring it up in our radar here in a second, is really close to you. It's only 56 miles away from you. What are you seeing tonight in the Wilmington area?
Well, the wind and the rain have definitely picked up like crazy. And it's, the sustained winds are one thing, but then you get those gusts. And I mean, they are enough to knock you right over. And earlier this afternoon, this morning, like it wasn't raining too bad. And then we obviously had all those tornado warnings, the tornado watches that caused a lot of damage in this area. So, going into these Dorian effects, I think that just kind of set this area up in a not so good position because you had homes that lost their roofs before Dorian even got, very close. But right now, I think I've got my selfie stick on here. I can probably show you a little bit of what we're seeing. This is Wilmington right now, right past here in the dark. Let's go over here if you guys can see those boats there. This is the river. So they obviously closed off the coast. That mandatory evacuation seems like a lot of people heeded that, moved a little bit inland to Wilmington and beyond. We checked today, a lot of the shelters were closed, or not closed. Some had reached capacity, I should say. But yeah, it does seem like everyone's pretty hunkered down at this point. And as far as weather effects, just strong winds and continuous rain that hasn't stopped for the past several hours.
All right. So one of the first questions I just got, Savannah, is what have you heard about the Bald Head Island, Oak Island area just to your south?
Well, a lot of the same. We've been trying to stay plugged into all of this. We've just been live for the past several hours. I think they're seeing a lot of the same of what we're seeing. They put mandatory curfews in place. Some of those areas, I think, put mandatory curfews in place at like noon. As far as damage, I'm just not sure yet. The other hindrance we have obviously is it being dark out, and so a lot of first responders aren't even going out. We actually just got an alert from Duke Energy down here that said they're not even going out to fix power outages because it's too dangerous out there on the roads. So I think we're not going to see a lot of the damage, if that's what the question is, until maybe later, until the conditions kind of die down a little bit. But as far as what I'm hearing, weather-wise, it's a lot of the same as what you're seeing behind me right now.
All right, and this question is going to be for Tim because you're closer than I am. This is for the Triangle area over in Raleigh, Durham. I'm getting a lot of questions about the weather there. What do you expect over that way? Because that's kind of border up on the eastern side of your viewing area.
Yeah, they've gotten rain. I know Brad in Charlotte, myself in Greensboro, we haven't really had that much today, but there has been a very sharp cutoff line. So over toward Chatham County, they've had closer to an inch of rain. I know over in the Raleigh area, they've had a good chunk of that as well. The winds have kind of behaved so far, but still playing it safe. That wind field could expand a little bit more tonight. So it might be a noisy night for you as you're trying to sleep a little bit. The rain's not going to stop, not for a while. It'll probably continue all the way through tomorrow morning. Probably minimal, if any, flooding issues, though, in the Raleigh area.
And a question that I'm getting a lot in the chat here is about the tornado threat. That I don't know about you, Tim, but that we expected some tornadoes, but that burst of tornadoes this morning, those were legit supercells.
Oh yeah, sure.
That was crazy. And so people are asking the tornado threat, how much longer you think it's going to go tonight?
I mean, it was pretty nuts. I mean, number one, the amount of tornadoes, and number two, like Brad was saying, they were supercell in structure. So that's kind of weather geek speak here. But what we're talking about are storms that really aren't just minimal tornadoes, but plenty enough to cause a lot of damage. And there was a lot of that from the Wilmington area all the way up, I think, as far north as Wilson. than earlier. That should be dying down as the storm kind of gets a little bit closer, kind of on those outer rain bands is where you have that bigger tornado threat. And it doesn't really extend much farther inland. So if you're in the Charlotte area, if you're in my Greensboro area, the Triad, we don't really expect anything like that. But if you're in Northeast North Carolina, that could still be an issue for a couple more hours.
I was going to say, until that storm passes by and the winds kind of shift, we're probably going to have that. Now, Efren, I'll ask you a question because this is your kind of neck of the woods, it's close to mine too, but a lot of questions about Myrtle and North Myrtle Beach. Obviously, we saw the Jeep there today, the red Jeep, which is now an internet superstar. Besides the Jeep, what's going on in Myrtle Beach?
It's funny because, one thing that Elijah Smith, who watches here at News 19 in the Columbia area, he said, what was the rain total for the Grand Strand? Well, it depends on where you were in the Grand Strand. Radar Doppler indicated, and fortunately, we're going to get a PNS from both the Wilmington Weather Forecast Office as well as the Columbia office, that I'm looking at the amounts just well inland in Myrtle Beach got anywhere from 4 to 5 inches of just rainfall. So if Elijah was in that area, you would see the rainfall. And of course, this doesn't account for the storm surge, but areas like Conway that got just absolutely decimated from the flooding from Hurricane Florence from last year, got a little bit over 8 inches of rainfall. You get over to Little River where they have the tornadoes. Just north of that, by not even 3 miles, they had over 11 inches. You head over to the other side of the river in the Grand Strand area, north of Garden City to Pleasant Hill, that radar estimated got about 12 inches of rain. And I'm looking to find out that somebody asked, is the storm still near North Myrtle Beach? Well, the good thing is that it's not. It's the last information is from the National Weather Service that got updated at 9 o'clock. Is now it's 55 miles south of Wilmington, North Carolina. So it's still raining in Myrtle. The rain, fortunately, is going to taper off, but the damage is already done. That rainfall that came down to the Grand Strand, for our viewers who evacuated from Charleston and headed up here to the Midlands, which we call Central South Carolina. In Charleston by the pier, they ended up with a total at 8 o'clock this evening, 9.5 inches of rainfall. 5 of that came down in 8 hours. And again, that's just rainfall. That doesn't attribute to the storm surge that, pretty much the entire South Carolina coastline from Kiowa Island and Edisto Beach, just a little bit ahead of Hilton Head Island, all the way up to Myrtle Beach. And the biggest concern that the National Hurricane Center had as far as the storm surge, we kept on seeing in 12-hour spurts that the possibility of storm surge in that Myrtle Beach area and just south of that could be exceeding 9 feet. Now, the good thing is that Dorian got close, but not close enough. So fortunately, it wasn't as bad, but the damage was done. In Little River, on the other side of the North Carolina state line, we had at least 12 reports of tornadoes. 4 of the National Weather Service are going to be looking at, and they've already confirmed 2 as actual tornadoes. So our area around the Grand Strand and Myrtle Beach, unfortunately, got the brunt of most of the damage from Dorian.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring Topper in here because, believe it or not, even though Topper's up in the D.C. area, not too far away from you, Topper, I'm sure there's going to be some impacts in the lower Chesapeake and Maryland shore. I mean, there's tropical storm or washes up in effect there, isn't there?
Yeah, and actually, Brad, there are actually warnings now up to St. Mary's County and up to Drum Point and Cobb Island and Chincoteague on the ocean's side. In fact, they've been extended now up almost to Cape May. So, yeah, not a huge impact in the D.C. metro, but we do cover areas into southern Maryland. And the tidal Potomac is kind of a funny animal because they could see some flooding early tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon with the initial winds. And then as the water sloshes back like a bathtub, it goes this way, it has to come back eventually. There'll probably be some tidal flooding in parts of southern Maryland and the tidal Potomac even on Saturday once the storm pulls away.
Yeah, it's amazing the impact that this storm has had, and it hasn't technically made landfall anywhere in the U.S. And I guess that's my next question, because we thought it might make landfall where near Savannah is in the Wilmington area, but it just missed the Cape Fear area. Literally, I think the western eye wall touched Bald Head Island, and it's going north. And now the next little area that sticks out is what Tim was talking about last night. Is Cape Lookout. There in the Crystal Coast area, kind of up there in Carteret County, and then the next is going to be Hatteras, which sticks out even further. So I guess my question to you, and I'm getting a lot of questions on the chat now about the Outer Banks, Tim. Maybe you could chime in. When do you think the worst will be in the Outer Banks, and how bad do you think it's going to be out there?
Yeah, and we're mentioning how Wilmington may be lucking out with the eye offshore. That's definitely a big difference. The eye wall is way different than just outside of that part of the storm. So if you get into the eye wall, your winds instantly go up about 20, 30 miles. I mean, a big chunk higher. So where's it going to go? It's still going to be paralleling the coast. The coast kind of curves inward a little bit, right? So if you're in Jacksonville or Onslow County or something, you're not going to get a landfall here. That would be out of the ordinary. But Morehead City, Atlantic Beach, Cape Lookout might have to be on guard here if it curves just there to the north and east. Time frame on that would most likely be the early hours of the morning, like the 4 or 5 o'clock range, and then toward Hatteras, where it's even more likely because they stick farther out, more along the lines of 7, 8, 9 o'clock or so. Basically, right around daybreak is when the Outer Banks needs to be on guard. The storm is picking up some speed, but just the fact that here in North Carolina, why do we get hit more than South Carolina does? We stick out, and so it gives the storm a lot more chances to hit directly. Wilmington area getting a little lucky here. We'll see about the Outer Banks. I think they have a better chance.
Yeah, and Savannah, I'll have this question for you. I noticed, especially the area you're in and the Morehead City area, took this storm really, really seriously. And I thought you made a great point earlier tonight when we were on another stream, that Florence last year has left a really big impact on the area where you are. So people didn't mess around with Dorian.
Yeah, I think that was, everyone I spoke to here, spoke to dozens of people in preparation for this storm, and everyone seemed to be taking it very seriously. I was saying on air, I think this is the 5th hurricane major storm I've covered, and I've never seen the kind of response, the kind of, mass acceptance of this evacuation order, I guess you could say. I mean, the beach was a ghost town. I know that's the word we use a lot, but it really was. And the reason everyone gave was Florence, especially in this area of North Carolina. They said, it really devastated so many of them. So many of them lost everything. And if they didn't, their neighbors did, or someone their neighbor knew did. And so I think that had a big impact on, why so many people were heeding the warnings and the evacuation orders this time around. I did want to ask you guys, because I was curious. There's something I was talking with my photographer about earlier. We were talking about these mandatory evacuation orders, and I was saying, do they ever charge anyone for that? I know they put the mandatory evacuation order in place, and I know you're basically, if you choose to stay, you're foregoing help, basically saying if something happens to you, there's no promises that someone can get to you. I had never heard of anyone actually being charged until this time. Here at Wrightsville Beach, they criminally charged people today, Class 2 misdemeanor for not evacuating. I had never heard of that before. I don't know if you guys have, but it was just another example of how seriously they're taking it over here.
Yeah, I had never heard of that. I remember during Katrina, a lot of people were saying, why are you forcing people to leave down there? Well, I know it changes by state, I think, the laws. In Louisiana, you can't physically force someone to leave their home. You can just tell them, or basically what you said, you tell them that no one will help them if they call for help. And most what they do is the last minute thing is the sheriff will go around and tell people to write their social security number and name and magic marker on their arm so that if they do die, they can identify them. And they use that as a scare tactic to get people to leave. But I know in a lot of states, they can't physically force people to leave their home. So that is interesting. I have never heard of that. What about you guys?
I hadn't heard that. I do know Wrightsville Beach is very serious about parking tickets. So maybe it's just something that kind of goes with the territory.
I have not heard of anything like that in South Carolina. That would be a first. Unfortunately, in South Carolina, this is now our 4th hurricane evacuation that we've done, and all 4 times, unfortunately, in the last 4 years, and this one makes 5. The governor has said, 2 different governors in the last 5 years have said same thing that every other governor has said. Once we get to that point where evacuation, we cannot do anything anymore, and if you haven't gotten out, well, if you call for help, we may not likely be able to get there until the storm has passed. But no such law that I've heard here, at least in the Palmetto State.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, the PIO, the Public Information Officer for Wrightsville Beach, got up there during a press conference today and said, look, you guys are putting our first responders at risk by being out there. Sorry. So he went through with the charges and cited that as the reason. I thought that was interesting. But, you ask about the reaction to this storm in particular. And I really think it's because this area in particular, again, for those who might just be tuning in, I'm in Wilmington right now. The reaction to this storm in particular, I think in large part really does have to do with the impacts that this area got from Florence. But also, I think a pretty good respect for the law enforcement agencies here when they have been saying for the past several days, look, get out, don't put yourselves in danger, just play it safe. Seems like people are really heeding those warnings.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, just because of what happened in the Bahamas, not that the same thing was going to happen here, but when you saw that spike up to 185-mile-an-hour wind, it was like, hey, this is the real deal. And that's why I think there's been a lot of criticism for some evacuations in some areas because people think it's overboard. But, this thing this was a dangerous storm, and you just can't take the chance. The thing about evacuating such a large area of the coast, you can't do that in a day. It takes several days. So one of the things they have to do, it takes 3 days to evacuate some of these areas. So unfortunately, the forecast cone isn't all that great 3 days out. You can't be super specific. So to evacuate people in 3 days, you gotta basically take the 72-hour forecast and say, all right, if this is going to be where it's in 72 hours, we got to evacuate now. So you tend to over evacuate in those situations. A lot of questions tonight about specific beaches. So I'll just throw some out there. Ocean Island, Topsail Island. I haven't heard a lot about those two beaches. I know the barrier islands were evacuated mainly because of the fear of overwash. But I do know from experience at Holden Beach, overwash is actually kind of the way the island's designed. There's actually little canals where the water overwashes and goes into the intercoastal, and things will be okay. I don't know what you guys think about some of these islands. Will they be overwashed? And is beach erosion going to end up being the biggest thing that they deal with?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big concern. High tide for most of the beaches is coming up at like 1:30. So in a couple of hours from now, one thing that might work in Brunswick County's favor here, which is Ocean Island, Holden, and these others, the eye has passed them now to the east. So their wind now is going to be coming in from the shore rather than from the ocean. So it's actually going to be pushing the ocean away from them. So that might help out Oak Island, Holden Beach, and those type of areas. On the flip side, the east-facing beaches, your Wrightsvilles, they're still getting the onshore flow. So it might be much rougher for Topsail Beach in those areas, especially around high tide, as you still have that coming in off of the ocean.
In the northern hemisphere, the structure of the storms, we're kind of lucky because the northeast quadrant of the storm has the highest winds. So that so far is offshore. And I'm looking at observational winds. Wilmington, where Savannah is, wind gust of 50, sustained at 30, wind gust of 45 now in Hatteras. So even though this thing has sustained winds of 100 miles an hour, and it's a massive storm, except for I only saw one ob. You guys can correct me. Frying Pan Shoals, where they had a wind gust over Hurricane Force. So we're kind of lucky that it's just parked offshore right now.
Yeah, and I think that's what Tim was alluding to about the eye. Like the water's still going to come in, but the winds, that's the big thing about where the eye goes. If it makes landfall, that's going to bring those 100-mile-an-hour winds at top, which you're talking about, really close to the shore. Because I was watching, I was fascinated not only by the Jeep today, but the American flag on the Frying Pan Tower. That, I don't know what they had that thing tied with, but whatever it is, I need some of that for my house because it's amazing. That thing was sitting there and we lost the daylight right when the eye was passing overhead, because it would have been cool to see some clearing. I was watching the obs, and I've actually been out. Oh, I lost my light there. That was weird. I've actually been out in that area, and the actual buoy is a little bit east of the actual tower. And I could see the winds go down as the eye was coming over, and it probably is going to be pretty spectacular amount to see what's left of that flag as out at the Frying Pan Tower. But I did see that obs at almost 80 miles an hour out there, but that's 65 feet off the water. So
wow.
Yeah.
Hey, Brad, we got 10 o'clock in, so winds are still 100 miles an hour sustained. They got a report of Fort Fisher Monument, North Carolina, sustained wind of 60, wind gust of 74. That's the highest. And then we've got Federal Point, North Carolina. Maybe you guys know where this is. Sustained of 59, wind gust to 75. That's just it.
And also, I just put the stats up there. So the other key thing, they're northeast at 13, so it's picking up speed.
Mm-hmm.
I actually thought it's been moving faster than the OBS, because where it is now, it was supposed to be 2 hours ago. It's like it's out racing the forecast points on the Hurricane Center forecast. So it'll be interesting to see if it accelerates more. It's getting caught up in the westerlies. And Topper, I'll ask you this as well, because last night we had Jeff on from VEC. How concerned are you that it's going to merge with the trough, and you guys might get some winds to expand to the northwest some as it kind of becomes extra tropical?
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. And I think of a couple things. It's so darn big that I think we're going to see tropical storm force winds on our ocean resorts, Ocean City, Bethany, Rehoboth, those areas, even up to Cape May, maybe as late as 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. But I think with the westerlies, and at least we have some steering currents, I think we're in pretty good shape in terms of getting the storm off shore. I have a friend who is trying to get married in Long Island over the weekend on Saturday. And I think things are going to work out. I think Friday's going to be a little messy even in Long Island. But it's, as you said, it's moving. That's the greatest news we have. The eye hasn't crossed land yet, and it's moving. And it's weakening a little bit. The pressure is about the same. It's dropped just a hair since the 9 p.m. advisory.
What was interesting to me is the reason that they've lowered the pressure the last couple of advisories is because the buoy measured lower pressure than the advisories were. So the buoy at the Frying Pan Tower was down to 959. So they actually lowered it because of an actual ob, which was kind of cool. It doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah, I think sometimes, viewers might understand a lot of these sometimes are estimates. Even when the aircraft's in there, you're estimating surface pressure because you're doing a calculation, you're extrapolating down to the surface for winds. So as they get close to the shore, it's kind of nice that you can actually get real-time observation. So some of the other questions we're getting are a lot of inland questions. I'm still getting questions about my market. Maybe I didn't do a good enough job explaining that there wasn't going to be any impacts, because people are still asking me if it's going to rain in Charlotte. Tim and I have been dealing with this a lot. Our viewing area literally has been from like the western part of our viewing area had sunshine and it was hot and it was a nice day. And there was 2 counties in the eastern part of my viewing area where it was rainy, dreary, and like 72 all day. So it's been this really sharp cutoff. And I think everybody thinks hurricane, they think it's massive storm that affects everybody, but it's really been location specific about, who has seen the worst weather. And I don't know what you guys think, but I think the tornadoes this morning might have been the most damage we've seen so far, because the South Carolina damage wasn't really that much. My friend down in Charleston said the king tide this past weekend was actually higher than the surge that they saw in Charleston Harbor. So I thought that was interesting. So I'm waiting to see if we end up getting maybe a surprise here at the end when we think it's weakening and moving out, and maybe the biggest surge in wind might be the last little gasp as it moves out of North Carolina.
Here in South Carolina, I was just looking at a couple of local storm reports. Overall, for the entire state of South Carolina, thus far, we've had about 107 reports of tropical storm or hurricane force wind damage. And just in the immediate Columbia viewing area, it was only down to 14. The very interesting thing about all of these reports that are coming in for destructive wind damage, 98% of them were from trees coming down to main roadways, and especially in the Columbia viewing area. So far, we have not gotten any reports of trees that have gone down on homes or injuries. Now, when I look at the big scope of damage, we have the reports of the tornadoes out in the Little River. We had, of course, storm surge and heavy rainfall flooding reports, and then the damages. The very interesting thing about all of these reports is that we didn't get any reports at all of flooding in the central South Carolina area. Now, keep in mind that there were areas of central South Carolina that were under tropical storm warnings. We were expecting winds of at least 40 at many times sustained, and we were under flash flood watch. But it's very indicative. In fact, Jason Puckett, who put out a Verify story at our stations, said, how accurate is NOAA and the National Hurricane Center in forecasting now versus back in the early 70s. Very interesting thing about the way the tracks from pretty much as it was approaching the Bahamas all the way to Florida and all the way up to the Carolinas now, the accuracy was the best that it's been in 5-6 decades. But it's still very difficult to disseminate that information to our viewers when you're talking about something that will change every 12 hours. And there's no way to pinpoint where it's going to go, let alone what the damage is going to be. And considering the fact that South Carolina was under the gun for another round and possibly significant damage, the models that the National Hurricane Center put out really did a good job thus far as getting everybody prepared. And one thing that I have to throw out, and Brad, you mentioned it, that a lot of communities, a lot of viewers have been saying in many markets, well, why did they issue this too early? And I'll make a very simple statement. When you're talking about evacuating just on the South Carolina coastline, almost telling 2 million people that you have to leave, in the Charleston area alone, you need 60 hours to get that population out. So you're talking 2.5 days. Pulling it too early for the alarm? I don't think so. If you wait less than 60 hours, you're now putting public in harm's way. So as far as our governor here in South Carolina, did what he absolutely needed to do for his people in his state. And kudos to the National Hurricane Center of how the forecast models have been really helping us so far with Dorian.
Yeah, can I just jump in there? I kind of railed a little bit on air today. I'm really tired of hearing the word unpredictable. This has been a pretty well forecast storm. And as I said, when things are moving 8 miles an hour, they really can't get away from you. So we have not run the Verify Puckett speeds. We're going to run it, though, tonight. And I think it bears out what you said, that the forecasting has become incredibly more accurate and more timely. And I don't want to give away my age, but I remember some of those days where we had one model and maybe it ran at night. Maybe we got an update, maybe we didn't. And we're kind of spoiled now with the accuracy. Obviously, it's not gospel, but I think the models, for the most part, since Monday, did a heck of a job.
Yeah, I agree. I think, around here, people remember Hugo because it kind of seems like it was a surprise. I went back, I've studied Hugo a lot. 30-year anniversary is coming up here. And the South Carolina coast only had 18 hours warning. 18 hours is not a lot of time. But if you think about in 1989, where most people just got an update maybe in the morning news or the 6 o'clock news or the morning paper, that they would go 12 hours without an update. Now with our phones and with social media and this every 6 hours, you're getting updates constantly. So a change today is going to get to you a lot quicker. So the communication of the information is just so different. And the fact that, 10 days ago, we kind of knew that the Southeast was going to be threatened is pretty amazing. These things will never sneak up on us again. But Topper's right. We're kind of a victim of our own success. We're so good at it that people expect it to even be better than it is. And we lose the fact that now hurricanes don't sneak up on us like the Galveston hurricane of 1900 when people are on the beach swimming the day before a Cat 4 comes in. It's a different time. So we're going to wrap up here, but I want to do a quick little around the horn here. I want to let Savannah go because she's got a long night ahead. Savannah, has anything picked up where you are in the Wilmington area? I see someone walking a dog behind you, so it must not be too bad.
Well, there were times that it really came strong that we were almost, rattled a little bit. But now it seems to have calmed down quite significantly. But again, these gusts, clearly it's dog walking time right now. We've had a little bit of a break in it. It was really strong for a while. It's kind of slowed down. I don't know if you guys are expecting it to pick back up here, but the rain is still just coming down in sheets. That seems to be the biggest issue right now. The winds definitely let up a little, which is nice.
Yeah, sometimes it's always the last little bit of the storm that's the biggest. I always notice that. I think it's over, and then there's one last little burst. I will update viewers in Eastern North Carolina. They have issued a new tornado watch till 7 o'clock in the morning. So they're going to keep a tornado watch up over there. So Tim, last thoughts before we kind of sign off for tonight?
Yeah, I think so far, the biggest damage has been the tornadoes. We'll continue to watch how high the winds get. So far, to me, they haven't been as high as I would have expected for the Wilmington area. But just as Brad said, a lot of times when we're covering these, I don't know if it's because we get fatigued and we're ready for it to be done, but it seems like the winds are very high at the end. When you get the back edge, they can almost be enhanced a little bit. So don't let your guard down through the morning hours. But yeah, so far, hopefully the worst can stay offshore. I really hope it stays offshore for the Outer Banks, because that'll be really rough if the eye comes on.
Yeah. Efren, last thoughts?
Well, I'm glad that at least for our South Carolinian communities that this is starting to finally fade away. Now, parts of their Eastern Midlands and the PD are still going to have wind gusts possibly up to 30 miles an hour, probably until after midnight. The rain is definitely diminishing. Unfortunately, down the Grand Strand and Horry, Marion, and Georgetown County, the rains and the winds will still continue. But as we get towards daybreak, it's pretty much going to be done. And thankfully, we South Carolinians are saying that Dorian is finally out, and now we go famously hot again to this weekend with highs back in the mid-90s.
Oh, yuck. I don't want those 90s. I want fall weather to be here. So Topper, you're going to get the tail end of this. How are you going to be working a long weekend, or what do you think's going to happen up your way?
Well, we have sent Melissa Nord to Ocean City. We have a lot of folks that go out there on vacation. A couple things you mentioned, Brad, and I have the same problem here. Tomorrow, our Western viewing area is going to see sunshine. It's going to be a very nice day. So we sort of have the same deal where well west of town is going to be nice. In town, a couple of showers, and then you really get into southern Maryland and out toward the coast to have any problems. So I will try to convey that again tonight.
Yeah. And thanks for tuning in tonight. Everybody in Eastern North Carolina, please keep your guard up, especially the Outer Banks. It's going to be rough tonight. And quick score update. I'm watching the game here at the station. It's 7-3 Green Bay against Chicago. And hopefully you didn't play Aaron Rodgers in your fantasy league tonight, because he is not having a good game right now. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.